Today's lesson is called Graphing Linear Equations. By the end of today's lesson, you'll be able to graph a linear equation by solving for y and for solving for all the different values of x. So in your notes, I need the graph as well as the t-chart. Make sure you have all of the x values. Don't worry about the graph just yet. So when graphing, make sure to look. We already have our y all by itself, so we're good to go, but we don't know what these y values are, so we still have to find them. So what you're going to have to do is take each x value, plug it in, that way we can solve for a y. So we're going to plug in -2 first. So all my x's are right here, each of them you'll be plugging in wherever you see an x. So my first equation will be 3 times a -4, and what I'm going to be plugging in, my x value is a -2, so I'll be plugging in a -2. Then all I'm going to do is solve it. So let's see, 3 times -2 is a -6, and then I have a -4. What's -6 minus 4? That's going to be -10. So -10 is going to be my answer. Then I have to do it again. So let's see, 3 times x minus 4. What value am I going to be plugging in? I'm going to be plugging in that -1. Let's plug in -1. See, 3 times -1 is -3. -3 minus 4 is going to give me a -7. There's my other y value. We got to do it 2 more times. So I have 3 times x minus 4. What's my new x value? In this case, it's going to be 0. So I plug in 0, and this one's a little bit easier. With 3 times 0, 0. 0 minus 4 gives me -4. So I have my other value of y. And last but not least, let's do 1. So 3 times x minus 4. What am I going to plug in? I'm going to plug in 1 this time. And what do I get? Let's see, 3 times 1 is 3. 3 minus 4 gives me -1. So now I have all my y values. But remember, my whole goal is to graph it. Well, how do I graph it? I got to have my coordinate points. So if I take a look, I got -2 and I got -10. That's going to be my first coordinate point. So let's do it, -2, -10. So let's see where -2, -10 is going to be on my graph. So remember, over here is the negative, let's see, positive, so not in the right area. Negative, negative. So my graph should be down here. So let's see, -2, -1, -2. So -2 is going to be right around here. So I'm in the right area. Now 10, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's not enough lines, so let's call this -2, -4, -6, -8, -10. So if -10 is right here, and I said that -2 is over here, my first value will be right here. That's -2, -10. So let's get rid of all the rest of my little work. Then let's find my next coordinate point. My next coordinate point, -1, -7. So let's write it, -1, -7. So where's that one going to be at? So I already said -1 should be right here. That's my -1. And we went 2, 4, 6, 8. That means it should be right in between. So it looks like my next one's going to be right about there. -1, -7. Then let's see, I need my other coordinate points. My next one is going to be 0, -4. So 0, -4. Remember, 0 is right here in the middle. That's my 0. So then, where's -4 at? Remember, 2, 4. So -4 is right there. Then, last but not least, my last coordinate point, which is going to be 1, -1. So let's do 1, -1. And that one is going to end up being, let's see, 1 is over here, -1's right in between, so it should be right about, let's see, here's my point. Right about there. That's my point. And our last step is to connect them. And I more or less connected them nicely, and now I have graphed my equation. Now remember, this line, it represents all the solutions. Right now, all we have are 4. There's many more other solutions. If I took a look at my line, another solution could be right here, over here, and over here. Many other solutions, not just the ones you solved for. So remember, it represents all the different solutions. So make sure you have this graph written down. Now I need you to write down the directions as well as the equation. Don't worry about that section just yet. Just the directions, oops, and the equation. Make sure it's written down. So for the directions, we have to solve in terms of y. If I take a look, my y is not isolated. That's what I need to do. So don't forget, we are still doing PEMDAS backwards. And what we're going to do first, addition and subtraction. So remember, my goal is to get this y by itself. So I need to undo addition and subtraction. Remember, this is technically a positive 3x, so I'm undoing the adding of 3x. How do I undo the adding? By subtracting. So I subtract 3x on both sides. Now remember, format matters. So my 2y comes on down. Remember, I always want an x to come first, and this is a negative 4, so it'll be minus 4. Then I undid addition and subtraction. I need to undo multiplication and division. Since this is technically multiplication, I will be dividing 2 on both sides. So my y is now isolated. I've reached my goal. Now remember, we want to break apart these fractions. The 2 will go with the negative 3x and with the negative 4. So now I have negative 3x all over 2, and then this is a negative, so minus 4 over 2. Now there's nothing I can simplify here, so that one's good to go. But taking a look at this, can I divide 2 into 4? Yes, I can. So this is going to simplify down to 2, so my equation is actually going to look like y is equal to negative 3/2 x minus 2. That's going to be my equation. So I'm going to take my equation, I'm going to write it up here. So what does y equal? Y equals negative 3/2, 3x over negative 2, negative 3x divided by 2 minus 2. That is my equation. So now go ahead and write down this chart. So now we are going to complete the table. So I have negative 3 over x, 3 times x, all divided by 2, minus 2. What's the first value I'm going to plug in? Remember, these are all my x values. I got to plug each of them into here. So my first value I'm going to plug into is negative 2. Now when I take a look, I'm multiplying, so technically I can cancel out this 2 with that 2. Now remember, it's a negative, so it leaves me with a negative 1. So when I simplify this, I get, what's a negative 3 times a negative 1? It's going to give me a positive 3. Don't forget, I'm subtracting 2. Minus 2, which will give me 1. So I got my first y value. Now I got to do it again for 0. So I have negative 3 times x divided by 2 minus 2. What am I going to plug in? I'm going to plug in 0. And anything times 0 is 0, so this becomes 0. Anything divided by 2 becomes 0. So I get 0 minus 2, which is actually negative 2. And now, last but not least, I'm going to do 2. So I have negative 3 times x divided by 2 minus 2. So when we're plugging in 2 this time, I plug in 2, and once again, do you notice? Hey, I am dividing by 2 and there's 2 up here. So they're going to cancel out to 1. So let's see, negative 3 minus 2 gives me negative 5. So now I have my x values and I have my y values. So what's my last step? I need to graph. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all these values and I'm going to move them over there. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write out my coordinate points. So I have my negative 2 right here and my 1 right here. So my first coordinate point is negative 2, 1. Second coordinate point, 0, negative 2. And my third coordinate point, 2, negative 5. So I have my coordinate points. Make sure these are in your notes. Now we're going to take these coordinate points and now we're going to graph. So now in your notes, go ahead and write down a graph. So we have our three coordinate points, so now we're going to be graphing. So my first one, negative 2, 1. So let's see, this is positive, positive. This is negative, positive. This one's negative, negative. And this one is negative, positive. So where's this one going to be? This one's going to end up somewhere in this coordinate. So let's see, negative 2 is 1, 2, negative 2, positive 1. That means it's going to be ending up right around there. There's my first coordinate point. Then let's do my second coordinate point. Remember 0. 0 is right in the middle. So if 0 is there, and I'm going down a negative 2, 1, 2, that means my second coordinate point will be right there. Last but not least, my last coordinate point is positive, negative. Oh, I flipped those. Sorry. Those should be positive, negative. There's the right place. So let's see, 1, 2, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which means I'll be right about there. Let's get rid of everything else I don't need. And then my last step is to draw a line in between. Now remember, it's not just these 3 coordinate points. There are other coordinate points on this line. We're just graphing 3 of them. So there's another point right here, another point right here, another point right here, another point right here. Remember, there's a lot more points on these lines, not just the 3 that we're solving for. So make sure you have this graph in your notes as well. Now, go and write down the directions again, and on your own, I want you to solve for y. Don't worry about the table just yet. We're solving just for y. So if you're solving at home, you should have gotten y is equal to x minus 6. Now we're going to take this equation, we're going to plug it in. So what does my y equal? Y equals x minus 6. So now, using your 3 different x values, figure out which each of your y values are going to look like. So if you were solving at home, if you plugged in a negative 1, you should have gotten a negative 7. Plugged in a 0, you should have gotten a negative 6. Plugged in a 1, you should have gotten a negative 5. Remember, our last step is that we need to be able to graph this. If we're going to graph this, that means we need coordinate points. So my first coordinate point, my x value is a negative 1. My y value, negative 7. First, my x value is 0. My y value, negative 6. My other x value is 1. My y value is negative 5. Now we're going to take these 3 values and we're going to use them to graph. So in your notes, you should have this graph, these 3 coordinate points, and go and try it on your own to graph them. If you're graphing at home, your graph should look something like that. Now in your notes, you need the title, Graphing Horizontal and Vertical Lines. I need the graph y equals 3 in your notes. I need this chart in your notes, as well as a graph. Give yourself some room because we're going to be graphing these points. Make sure you have all 3 in your notes. Now, what does it mean by y is equal to 3? Now, you're saying, well, what's my x values? How do I figure those out? Well, when y is equal to 3, we're looking at 1, 2, wrong direction. 1, 2, 3. This is 3. Y is equal to 3. So what does that mean? What do you think all these y values are going to be? All those y values are going to be 3. So we're going to be plugging them all in. We can pick any x value, and it doesn't matter because our y value will be 3. So what do you think this is going to look like? If we try graphing, what does negative 3, 3 look like? That's our first dot. Negative 2, 3. Second dot. Negative 1, 3. 0 and 3. 1, 3. 2, 3. 3, 3. If you notice, this is a straight line. Y equals 3 is a straight line. It crosses the y-axis because we're looking for when y is equal to 3. And I want this in your notes. So all lines, y is equal to some value k, they're always going to be horizontal. Always going to be horizontal. And it's just y is equal to one value. In this case k, or it could be 3, all different values. So make sure this is in your notes. So we can pick any value, y equals k, y equals negative 4 is a straight line, and y equals 0 is a straight line. They're all going to be horizontal. So make sure you also have this graph in your notes. I want y is equal to 3, y is equal to 0, y is equal to negative 4. And in your notes, I want the graph of x is equal to negative 2. I want this t-chart as well as this graph. So we have now x is equal to negative 2. So if we look on our x-axis, 1, 2, this right here is negative 2. So I have all my negative 2 values. What do you think my y values are going to be? Well, if you take a look at my other one, I get to pick any x value, it didn't matter because my y values were 3. So in this case, my y values are anything I choose. I choose the same exact values. So let's see what this is going to look like. My first graph pointed is negative 2, negative 3. Goes right there. How about negative 2, negative 2? Right there. Negative 2, negative 1. Negative 2 and 0. Negative 2 and 1. Negative 2 and 2. Negative 2 and 3. If you notice, it's a straight line. So I have my x is equal to -2. I'm right here, that's where -2 is. I'm crossing right where it's at -2. So, what do you guys think kind of line this is going to be? In this case, all lines are going to be vertical. So I want this in your notes. Whenever x is equal just to one value, k could be 2, 5, 6, -10, -30, it's going to be a vertical line. So make sure that's in your notes. So we can have x is equal to 3, or we can just have x is equal to 3. So make sure this is in your notes. I want this graph. I want x is equal to -2 and x is equal to 3. I want you to draw what the graph looks like. Now, I need you to write down the directions, graph each equation below, and is the equation a function, and then go and try to solve 1 and 2. Make sure you graph it, and then answer the question. So if you're solving at home, your graph should look like this, crossing right where it equals to 4, or right where it equals to -2. This is not a function. Why? Because it does not work with the vertical line test. It fails the vertical line test. Why? Because it hits all these different points. And number 2 is a function. Why? Because when we do the vertical line test, it only hits once. Now, don't write this down. We're just going to talk this one through. So, Marty earns $3 for every necklace she makes. Our goal is to write a linear equation that represents a situation and a graph it. So they're telling you, every time you see an X, it represents the number of necklaces. Every time you see a Y, it's the amount of money earned. So, how do I set up this linear function that they want me to have? So Y is my end goal. For every $3, so for every necklace I make $3. So necklace represents X. Well, depending on how many necklaces I make is how much money I make. Well, how much money do I make per necklace? I make 3. So my equation should be y is equal to 3x. Y is how much money I'm going to make, and x is the necklaces. So my equation is going to be y is equal to 3x. So let's go ahead and solve it. It's going to be 3 times x, 3 times x, 3 times x. Let's see what this is going to equal. My first value is 0, which is equal to 0. Well, that makes sense, right? Because if I have made 0 necklaces, I haven't made any money just yet. So my first coordinate point is going to be 0, 0, because from my 0 and from my 0. So let's see, my second y value, I got 1. So let's plug a 1 in there. That's going to give me 3, which makes sense. If I made 1 necklace, I got $3. So my second coordinate point is 1, 3, and my last coordinate point. So if I put in 2, I get 6, which makes sense. If I make 2 necklaces, I get $6. So my last coordinate point is going to be 2, 6. So let's go and graph this. My first coordinate point, 0, 0, is right there, right? Because if I've made nothing, I've made no money. Let's see, my next coordinate point, 1, 3. So I got 1, 3 is like right in between there, so we're going to go right about there. And then my last coordinate point, 2, 6, 2 and 6 goes about right there. And my last point is just to, oh, that line's a little off, let's try again, is to draw a graph. And that is what my graph is going to look like. So based off how many necklaces I've made, I can figure out how much money I'm going to earn. So if I looked at it, if I made 4 necklaces, it looks like I'd earn $12, which makes sense. Or if I made 6 necklaces, let's see, it looks like my line is going right about here, I'd make 18 necklaces. I'd make $18. So I can figure out how much money I've earned based off how many necklaces. Now my question to you is, why is it that I have no negative values? Why do you think there's no negative values? Can you make negative amount of necklaces? No. So that's why there are no negative values. So now I need a 2-sentence summary. What did we learn about today about graphing linear equations? We learned about vertical lines, horizontal lines, whether it's a function, not a function, and how to find it. How do we find it? We have to solve for y and then plug in all our different x values.